Hello and welcome to the Weird World of Knowing. I'm Rachel Earing, and today we have a fabulous guest who's going to be talking about the world of funerals and transcendence and what does that mean. She is an independent celebrant, accredited celebrant, which means that, well, I'm going to let you explain what that actually means. But, people come to you for that different way of being sent off to say goodbye to people, and I think it's really important that we have these other ways now of being able to say goodbye to people because there are so many different beliefs out there. People are not looking to the traditional ways of religions anymore. People are very, very spiritual or going for the humanist approach. So welcome, Jacqui Tillyard. How are you?
Hello, Rachel. I'm fine, thank you. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think that there are more options available to people. They don't just have to go for a traditional church ceremony these days, where the same funeral script is read out time after time. If people have absolutely no religious belief whatsoever and they want to keep it simple, they can go and have a ceremony with a humanist. The humanist believes that we're here in this life, then that's it. And if that's what your beliefs are, then you can pay for your 8-minute ceremony. That's about how long that one lasts.
Gosh.
I'm somewhere in between of those two options. So the traditional is the church ceremony. The humanist doesn't include any religious content and is quite short and brief. And they don't believe in transcendence. So there's a slight difference to what a humanist does to what I do. And quite often that is misunderstood in the general public because of how it's explained by the funeral industry. Actually, they don't always explain when you go to the office to arrange a ceremony for your loved one exactly what the difference is between the people who are available to support the family during that really difficult time. So the celebrant is pretty open in terms of they may have their own beliefs, but it's not about what I believe when I'm dealing with a family. It's what they want, and my job is to conduct and carry out their wishes. And if the loved ones expressed their wishes before they passed, then we will include that as well. But I always try and personalize it so it is a real celebration of life, and the energy and the essence of the person is included in the ceremony. So it's not a one-trick pony script that a vicar would read out. If they want to have rock and roll and a bit of bang and crash or cheesy pop with hymns, I'm cool with that. If they want to make reference to hobbies and interests, then still have the Lord's Prayer, that's fine with me. It's what the family wants. But what's important is that the essence of the person is celebrated. And that's what I always try and do. I mean, it's interesting. There was something on TV and in the press earlier this week. There was a guy who was a fanatic about Only Fools and Horses, and they had a ceremony where the funeral director, ran down the road with two guys dressed as Batman and Robin, like the episode, and they had a trotter's trading hearse supplied by a company called Only Fools and Hearses, and it was a yellow three-wheeler with the coffin on the back of it, and they put Del and Rodney on a customized coffin. And it was a real celebration of this guy's life, and that's what the family wanted. And he's made nothing for it.
I am literally going cold, because that's a real signal to me that actually that is just really very in tune with the family, because it feels like there's very much spirit here with me. Because let's go that cold. It's like a cold, so that really feels special. The weird world of knowing, what we're talking about here, it really is about making things as normal as possible. All these weird things that are out there for people to embark on now. Some people think that is really quite weird. Why would you want to somebody else, Batman and Robin running down?
Absolutely.
Yeah. When you are celebrating somebody's life, and that epitomizes that person, because they've lived and breathed.
Exactly.
An absolutely beautiful gift.
Yeah.
Not for them because they've gone, although they're probably watching. But their family and their friends to be reminded of the essence of that person in that that goodbye moment.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
important. So that's one story that you've got that some people might think is really quite weird. Was it? Can I just ask? Was that organised by the family, or was that
Yes.
organised
Every
by a request of the person before they left?
No, the family said that the daughters were interviewed on TV last night, and they said that their dad was absolutely fanatical about the show, and that he would have loved to have it included in celebration of his life. And he was quite a joker, a bit of a Del boy, and they thought it was really important that that part of their dad's life was celebrated because it was so important to him. So I don't know what the circumstances were behind it, because I don't think he was all that old, so I don't know whether the death was expected or not.
Yeah.
But the daughters wanted to celebrate what was important to their dad. And again, I've had that happen. I've done Star Wars themed ceremonies. I haven't had to dress up as a stormtrooper yet, or Princess Leia, thank goodness. But I have actually had a guy who was very keen on all things sci-fi, and luckily his name was Scott, so we beamed him up.
Oh wow!
So that happened. I've had singers who loved certain ways of dressing, so I've dressed up. So a couple of weeks ago, I was dressed in my 50s outfit, and my little spotty shoes and my sticky out skirt, and the lady loved that era. So I thought, well, that was a little nod to her and the group that she sang with. So I wore an outfit that was appropriate. We quite often have pipers to pipe in. I live in a community where there's a lot of Scottish people, and we quite often have pipers out. So I'll wear my spray of heather and I get my tartan jacket out. We always try and accommodate and fit in with what's important for the family.
Oh, I absolutely adore that, because I have a feeling that that's the way that I would like to be sent
Me
off.
too. I don't want the thing is, it doesn't matter how long your life is, it should be celebrated because you have spent the time on this planet doing the things that hopefully are important to you, and to push that aside, I think is a crime. One of the saddest funerals I've ever done is a 101-year-old, and she had very few family still alive, and the memories are lost. And I got this wonderful long life, but no stories hardly to recall, because the daughter said she didn't talk about that part of her life. She didn't talk about those early years. She never shared that. And I never asked. And it's like, well, how sad is that? Uh, so it's sometimes a difficult scenario. The other thing I have to gauge is that, I think you described this whole process as weird. I believe this is weird because fear is instilled in everybody about death. So we're afraid to talk about it. We don't want to contemplate our end. So we don't say what we would like to have unless we're facing death. Quite often if somebody's terminally ill, they will talk about it. But generally, people don't want to talk about death. So consequently, I'll go and visit a family and they can't tell me what their mum liked in music, or what was important to her, or if she wanted hymns or prayers or some sort of extra piece, because they've never asked, because they're afraid to face the conversation around death. Um, it is changing. There are other people around in the UK trying to make death normal. You've got people like the Coffin Club who will encourage people to come in and decorate their own coffins and talk about their own mortality. I've been speaking recently to a lady in Europe who's created a card game which families play so that they can talk about, well, if I was celebrating my life, what is my favourite song? What colour would I love people to wear? What poem is my favourite? So they've got all this information and the family know. And then when somebody like me pops up to say, come on, tell me all about your dad, your mom, your brother, they can do that. And they can do it because they've had that conversation in a fun environment rather than it being a morbid conversation.
And I think that is so, so important. We don't
Yeah,
talk about it. I think things like you say are changing, especially with the pandemic.
yeah,
We've been faced with things that we've not wanted to face at
no,
all, or being alone and not being with their families. So to be able to have that gift to celebrate a life rather
yeah,
than, obviously, that's not taking away the emotions of how,
no,
the grief. It's really not taking away the grief process,
no,
because that will hit you sort of at any time. We'll have those
exactly.
reminders of you know, it just could be opening up a certain cupboard in the kitchen and having that mug there that was that person's mug, you know.
Yeah.
It brings all those feelings back. But if we can transition those emotions into joy of that person's life and celebrate that person's life, it enables us to not just move on, but it enables us to realize that actually that there's still hope for us. We're still here. We've got something to celebrate, and life does carry on, as
It does.
difficult as that may be at times. Life does carry on, and if we can keep that joy and that happiness in mind of that person's attributes that they gave us, because that is usually what we're missing from that
Yes.
person when they
Yeah, absolutely.
their attributes, their character, their kindness, their love that they've given to us, and we suddenly realize we're not going to have that anymore. So that really becomes back at us.
Yeah, definitely.
That reflects back at us. So it's doing that personal work on ourselves rather than where that person has gone. Because tell us a little bit about the weird moments where you may have been doing a ceremony or anything beforehand, where you've been preparing for things,
Yeah.
where you may have had signs of
Yeah.
the essence of
Or
that.
we get signs. Outside of being a celebrant, I work with energy, so I'm very attuned to, you know, how things feel. And quite often I can walk into a crematorium chapel preparing for the ceremony I'm about to conduct, and it doesn't feel right when I walk in. And I'm aware that whoever has been in before us, their energy is still in the room, and it feels a little bit weird. And I know I've mentioned this to you in our pre-chat the other day. I'll clap the energy out of the room just to change it, because if you sense that the spirit and the soul of somebody else is still around, and it's like, I think that sometimes when people transition, they haven't fully accepted that they have transitioned, and they are desperately holding on to the hope that they can stay on an earthly plane. So you sense that their energy is still in the room. And I've even, you know, jokingly said, "Boy, you come on, it's time for you to leave this space. There's somebody else coming in. You've had your turn. Please, can you leave the room?" And if you send them to kind of love and grace, and just stay calm in your own energy, they will dissipate. I've even seen this happen when somebody dies. The physical form appears to change shape because the soul is leaving the body, and the appearance changes. It's almost like they shape shift in the nicest possible sense. I've witnessed that with family members. And this thing about, you know, grieving and energy. Grief is a very profound energy, and you don't know how it's going to affect you. One of the reasons that I am very proud to do this job, I always was, but 3 years ago, I lost 9 people out of my life in 1 year. So I lost my mom, my oldest uncle, my oldest school friend who I'd known since I was 4 years old. I conducted all 3 of those ceremonies, which was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Um, and it kind of gives you, it does give you a sense of your own mortality. It's a contemplation. But beyond the energy of, you know, if I'm going in to conduct the root of thing, the other side of the ceremony, quite often the family will get signs. So this is said with the greatest of respect, but I often get requested somewhere over the rainbow, whether it's Judy Garland, Eva Cassidy, or the Hawaiian chap with his ukulele. That's very popular at the moment. And I guarantee, if we are in not quite so turbulent weather as we've got today, but if it's rained, if there's a bit of sunshine comes out, inevitably we leave the chapel, or the funeral car will go back down the drive, a rainbow will appear. And it's almost like the person has been watching on with their spirit and sending signs. Myself, I used to get little feathers arriving out of nowhere when all the windows were closed from my mum. There was a robin that would appear in the garden and peek through the window. My sister had the same experience, and so did my dad, all at the same time. So you kind of think, is there something in this? And quite often when I speak with families, there've been birds, or the dog behaves strangely, or feathers are appearing, or strange signs that remind them. And another experience I had with the rainbows in particular. The lady's daughter gave everybody a silk butterfly to remember her mum by, and we had a butterfly fly into the creme, and the rainbow appeared as the funeral car got to the wake afterwards. So there's a great big rainbow over the hotel where everybody got to talk about this lady. So you know, there are
So many.
signs of energy everywhere if you pay attention to them. And I think that also gives people a sense of their loved one isn't completely gone, that they can't see them, they can't have a personal one-to-one conversation with them, but they can sense the energies around them still. And it's, you know, if that brings comfort and helps them through the grieving process, then absolutely I encourage that. But that's it's people's choice.
It is, absolutely.
But I think it eases the process of death, and that's what frightens most people.
Yeah. And, you know, there may be some of you who are listening right now who just do not believe in any of this energy business. So if that is the case and you've managed to listen this far in, then there is some sort of intrigue there that that part of you is interested in. So I'm just going to suggest that you might want to check out the podcast with Vasileios Basios, who is a research physicist at the University of Brussels. Towards the end of the podcast, we are talking about transcendence and how physicists are now beginning to try and measure what actually happens in the room when somebody passes. And the findings that they've not completed the research yet, obviously, but that, you know, that is in progress, of that there might, you know, there are probably significant shifts when that actually happens, because they're able to just put things in the room rather than actually be there. They are able to measure the room rather than just the person's heartbeat or anything like that. So yes, I'd suggest that you go and check that out, because there's some documentation from Peter Fenwick, who again is a scientist who has documented, has got research on this. So if you go to that research, you can actually download that information as well, so that you've got a different perspective from all areas that might actually help you if you're inquisitive to find out a little bit more. So how did you get into this?
By accident. Because I've got a big mouth and I don't mind talking to audiences, basically. Prior to doing the work, I did quite a lot of government funded projects for healthcare, for local charities, for my business support agency. So I was very used to talking to an audience as a trainer, as a host of, you know, business networking events and so on. And about 5 years ago, I found myself in this constant cycle of bidding for the contracts, and you get the contract for 12 months, 18 months, and then government, you're not government alike, they change their mind, they go away. And I got bored with keeping bidding for these pieces of work all the time. I said, I can't be doing with this anymore. What can I do where I'm using my skill set and, you know, doing something I enjoy doing? And I started doing a piece of energetic therapy work training, and I came across a lady who was doing the training, and she got on her title, energy, whatever she was doing, and celebrant. Oh, what's a celebrant? And I clicked on the link. I knew this lady, and she's absolutely lovely. And I found out she was basically promoting mainly wedding ceremonies. I thought, I could do that. And then I looked to see where there was a local training in my area. And there was one coming up about 3 weeks hence. And I went, oh, that's interesting. And I went downstairs, I said to my husband, I think I found something to do outside of my therapy work. And he went, okay, what is it? And I said, it's celebrant. He went, what's one of those? And I said, well, it's a person who conducts funeral ceremonies, wedding ceremonies. He went, that's the best bloody idea you've had in years. I will pay for you to go and do that training, which he did. And then like 3-4 weeks later, I was up on my way to Northamptonshire. I did the training. It was virtually on my doorstep. It was a week-long training initially, and then the process to become accredited means you've got to submit case study work, examples of your work, experiences, and give them understanding that you can deal with someone going through the grieving process and handle them with dignity and loving care. Which it took me, because I wasn't working all the time, it took me about 3 or 4 months to complete that piece. And I qualified as an accredited level, I think it's level 3 accredited in celebrancy, a certificate in celebrancy. So if this industry ever gets regulated, I have an officially government recognised qualification. So I should be ahead of the game if the industry changes, because it is regulated at the moment.
Yeah.
So, and I say, I went out into the world expecting to just do lovely, happy, trappy ceremonies in the summertime for weddings, for couples who didn't want to go to the registry office. Actually, my experience is I prefer doing funerals, because they're short term. You know, within the next 2 to 3 weeks what's coming in. That sounds like it's another one. And excuse my phone's going off. And the weddings are so long term, because they're looking 2 to 3 years hence sometimes. It's too long a wait. So I prefer to help in the now. And you don't get bridezillas at funerals. The brides are always interested in the fripperies. So they don't really care about the content of the ceremony often. And I find they're more worried about the photo booth and the sweet cart and what colour shoes they're going to wear. And it's really not a meaningful conversation. But I'm very lucky the people I have worked with have not been like that. So I'm quite select, and I maybe will only do about half a dozen weddings a year. This year I've got a string of people wanting to renew their vows. I think that's come out of being 2 years in lockdown, recognising the qualities in one another and saying, let's do this and let's celebrate it, which is lovely. So I've got that coming up this year. But with the funerals, it's somebody that's really keen to get hold of me, isn't it? I'm hoping my charming assistant downstairs will get this. The funeral thing, you feel like you can instantly help somebody, and that's really important. So I find that I prefer to do funerals. I can step into that moment of deep grief, deep sadness for the family, and hold the space for them. And that's been really important, certainly over the last 2 years, where we've had restrictions on numbers of people. So if people have had a big family, it's been literally, let's pull a straw and see who can and can't attend this loved one's funeral. That's been a difficult space to hold. I've had situations where there've only been 3 people in the chapel, where there could have been up to 100 before.
Oh, well,
That's the hardest space to hold.
Father passed, there were 4 of us.
Yeah.
Myself and my partner, brother and his wife.
Yeah.
My dad. It was a very strange funeral, especially strange because my brother and I had made a real connection a couple of days beforehand and really understood my dad's life journey.
Yeah.
And how relevant it was to what we're doing now. And he passed sort of 24 to 36 hours after we had that sort of conversation, where the energy, again, we're talking about energy, the frequency between the 3 of us seemed extremely connected on a very deep soul level. It wasn't a huge shock, but always, of course, it is always a shock.
It is always a shock.
The actual funeral, it was very, very peculiar, because I could feel my dad there, and he was laughing, and it made me giggle. So I'm sat, in the funeral, and I was giggling, and I'm thinking, gosh, this is so weird. Should I be doing, and then you question yourself, should I be doing this? I should be upset because, I shouldn't just be giggling here on my own, because it doesn't feel, because nobody else really understood it. My brother perhaps did, but the other people that were there didn't.
I know.
In a way, it's like, out of respect for them, you try not to.
Yeah, I've had situations where I've gone to visit a family, and they're really quite upbeat about this has to be a celebration of the person's life, and they tell me all sorts of funny stories, sometimes quite naughty stories, and I'll tell them, and because the audience almost, you're absolutely right, we're conditioned to this grief thing. We have to be solemn and serious, and we can't laugh, we can't smile, we can't giggle. And I'll tell the funniest story, and it goes on stony silence. You go, okay, let's move on. And it's just people sometimes don't know how to deal with it. The thing is, grief isn't linear. Yeah. And nobody should tell you how to feel, only you know how you should feel. And if those instances of being aware of a presence, aware that your dad or your mom's energy is there, and that gives you comfort, then so be it. Yeah. And that's all I say to people.
It is very, very personal. Absolutely.
It is.
And it's trusting yourself. And being respectful. But if you ever do go to a funeral and somebody is giggling, or is quite joyous, but you're not feeling that because you're really suffering right then. It's
Yeah,
try not to judge each other. I suppose
absolutely. And the other place that shows,
judgment away, it actually makes so much difference to everybody moving forward. There's just respect
yeah,
where you are at and
yeah,
where the other person is at instead of judging, because we don't understand how everybody else is feeling, do we?
absolutely. And the other place,
Oh, sorry.
the other place where judging often shows up, and I think this started to shift when Princess Diana's brother made his address at her funeral. But we quite often now have a lot of family members who want to say a few words or read something, and it's the hardest thing in the world when you're grieving to do that. And I've witnessed so many shaking legs and hands and wobbly voices and runny noses, but they want to do it. And if someone has the courage to go up, if the audience, the mourners, the people in the chapel are on side, they will do that speech and people will applaud now. And that's become the norm in a ceremony of celebration of life. And I love that because that is acknowledgement of the person and the courage of the person who is grieving, who's got up to say a few words.
Filling up now.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I nearly went yesterday. It's not always easy because certain things remind you of your own situation. Yeah,
The personal
yeah,
is having real courage.
yeah,
Feel so courageous to be able to stand up there and speak about someone, but the love that you have for that person,
yeah.
and that the audience sending that love to you, I suppose, is what gets
Exactly. Yeah, it is. It's a reciprocal thing, and that again shifts the energy in the room. And and the other thing often happens is that a ceremony, if it is an upbeat thing, will leave on an upbeat song. So it's quite normal to have always look on the bright side of life. Don't worry, be happy. Yesterday we had Islands in the Stream, a bit of Dolly Parton. You never know what they're going to choose, and actually for me I love it when they choose unusual pieces, because there are some stock songs that crop up weekly, and you go, not this again, please no. And you don't want to do that to the family. You go, well, that's a great idea, and you've kind of got to be with them with their choice. But I love it when they choose unusual songs, and that really says something about the person and the importance of that piece of music or the lyric in that piece of music for that person. So yeah, and sometimes people are just, tongue in cheek, and we get people requesting things like Disco Inferno. I've had somebody who was an Elvis fan, and his leaving song was Return to Sender. So there's a bit of humour in the music choices sometimes. So yeah.
love it. Absolutely love it. So, gosh, Jackie, what advice would you give and this is right, totally offbeat now after what we've been discussing, but for someone who is just starting their working life,
Yeah.
knowing that there are so many different things that we can now do for a living, and a funeral celebrant being one of
Yeah.
them, what advice would you give someone just starting up on their working life?
Okay. This job is not about the money. So if you think this is an easy thing to do, it isn't. If you think it's a quick way in, if you've got a bit of speaking experience, it isn't. It's soul work. And unless you can hand on heart go, I love doing this job, I love serving these families, I am here to serve, don't do this job. There's a lot of people out there who don't do the qualification. I've seen this happen with soap operas, and all of a sudden, Sally out of collar is a celebrant. She's not. She thinks she can do it. She knows how to make a speech. She's not qualified, and she can't cope necessarily with what's going on for the family. We've been trying to cope with that. So unless you're prepared for that, it's not an easy job to do. People are gifted, and we've got some marvelous celebrants out there, but I've seen equally bad celebrants as well. So unless you're totally committed to it, don't look at it. It is competitive, and it's growingly competitive. So, the people, how we get our work, if you're doing funeral work, is to work with the local funeral arrangers, at the funeral directors. It's not always easy to get in there, and they show no loyalty sometimes. Well, ones I do, but people often don't show loyalty. You can't buy business with sausage rolls and boxes of cakes necessarily, which is what some people try and do. But if you really want to look at some sort of soul or spiritual work that is non-religious, then by all means look at it. But really want to do it and commit to doing it because you love doing the work, not because it earns you a quick fee. And the other thing is, people see us for about half an hour delivering that service. What they're not taking into account is we spent a couple of hours visiting the family. We can take up to a day to write the funeral if it's bespoke. And then we've got to rehearse it, tweak it, agree it with the family afterwards, and go out there and do it on the day. So each ceremony for me is virtually a full day's work. When you look at the fee we get, it's very little money. So that's why I say it's never about the money. So unless you want to commit, it's not a go-to job. But if you feel called to do it, it's a calling and a vocation rather than let's try this out. If you want to earn more money, you're probably better go working in a warehouse. But I love doing the work.
Yeah, and it is very much soul work. I agree.
Yeah.
Definitely. Just moving on. So it has been an absolute pleasure, Jacqui, to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me.
And to be able to talk about death in a different way.
Yeah.
With some joy and laughter and some funny stories. Maybe weird for some people, but it's becoming, like you say, more and more common for people to celebrate people's lives. And the grief will come later. But if we can sort of get through that stage, and that's how you want to do that, then you can by all means get in touch with Jacqui, and the details will be underneath the podcast details. And you can find out more. You can ask even more questions. I'm sure she won't mind.
No, absolutely. Maybe if people want to have a look, I've got a website for my celebrancy. I work in Leicestershire and the surrounding areas. I'm based in South Leicestershire. But if you want to have a look at what my business is all about, my website is yourspecialceremony.co.uk, and it will give you a bit more background as to what a celebrant does versus a traditional offering and a humanist. So it'll give you a better perspective of what we do to support families at a very sad and lost time in their lives.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
You're
I've
welcome.
got the last question for you, Jacqui.
Okay.
Who would you like to see on or hear on the show?
Who would I like to hear on the show? There's a wonderful man called, what's his name? Richard Wilkins. He's a fabulous orator. He's written some interesting books. He's got a fantastic take on this side of things as well. He has made lots of money and lots of money. And he will talk about going back to the side and said, if ever you're having a bad day, go visit people in a hospice and life's not so bad.
Gosh, yeah, absolutely. Maybe not for everybody. And maybe
Not for everybody, but yeah.
it is me.
Yeah, but he's a very interesting person to interview, definitely, if he's up for it.
Fantastic. I love that. Thank you very much. You've been a wonderful guest. Thank you. Indeed. If you're interested in hearing any more of the Weird World of Knowing episodes, then do tune in because we have such a variety of guests. We'll be back next week, and I look forward to seeing you all then. Take care. Thank you so much for listening on The Weird World of Knowing. I do hope you enjoyed your time with us. I'm Rachel Earing, your host. And gosh, I'm having a ball putting all of this together for you, so I hope you are too. And if you are, please do like, subscribe and share with those who might actually benefit from these weird moments of knowing as they realise how many of their own they've been having all their life. Take care and we'll see you next week.